hoping you could add some additional comments because you're really the expert on this.
Thank you, Mark. You actually summed it up nicely. Perhaps one addition from my side. Let's not forget that the ultimate goal of documentation management is to provide the end user with the information they need to get the job done. This might seem obvious, but rarely seems to be the focus of discussions when evaluating the different products available on the market. I can only recommend to include a subset of end users early on and to evaluate their feedback thoroughly, as you want to make sure that they feel comfortable with the way content is presented to them. Personally, I, as an end user, want an easy-to-use system that frees me of any distractions and only presents me with mission-critical content, meaning content specific to my particular role and mission. That's it.
Okay, perfect. Well, listen, hey, thanks for the summary. And for those of you watching today, what we'd like to do at the very beginning of a webinar is just to give you a very quick overview of what we're going to talk about so that you understand really what are the details that we're going to get into. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to have Roger and I just give you a very high level, brief understanding of what the upcoming webinar is, so you know what the highlights are and what the points are. So Roger, let's just jump into that right away. I'm going to start in by just asking you, first of all, what are some of the key EFB capabilities really that Yonder, is providing?
So Yonder makes it easy for end users to focus on what matters to them. Thanks to Yonder's dynamic content capabilities, the visible information, even within a document, can be limited towards the end user, thereby ensuring that a given user is only presented with the right information at the right time. The same principle even applies for revision notifications. Instead of presenting end users with lengthy highlights of revisions, where they would have to figure out themselves which changes actually have an impact on their role, they're presented with personalized revision notifications. Or, in other words, they're only notified about the changes that actually do have an impact on their role and mission. No more, no less.
Yeah, perfect. So basically what you're doing is you're making it easier for individuals to have customized access to information, and you're making it easier for the people that are authoring and editing, to have access to editing and maintenance of the applications. Yeah, that's really excellent. I think that makes a really big difference.
So perhaps from my side, Mark, as far as keeping content up to date is concerned, documents in Yonder are end-to-end controlled, meaning that workflows govern document revisions and approvals from the initial document creation throughout its remaining lifecycle. It's certainly worth mentioning that while the initial document creation is executed via Yonder's dedicated content manager for expert users, the evolution of a document is actually driven by the input of the airline subject matter experts via the Yonder front end, namely the Yonder reader. As a result, SMEs can communicate their expertise by means of simple change requests without having to interact with complex editor solutions. After all, SMEs are usually not interested in becoming professional editors, but merely aim to get their expertise across. So keeping it simple for them is certainly favorable. Yeah. And speaking of keeping it simple and transparent, all revision and approval related interactions are executed right in Yonder and always notify the right people at the right time about having to take certain actions or join in on a discussion and so on, making it easy to keep track and simplifying revision management for all stakeholders involved.
Yeah, perfect. I've used a lot of EFBs in my life, and having easy access to the information in a customized manner and an easy ability to be able to update it really makes a big difference. Thanks for sharing that. Okay.
My pleasure.
Yeah. So listen, the next thing that we want to talk about is I know that you have a hosted component as part of the system, but if I'm a user of an EFB, normally I'm on a tablet device, and so please tell me, what is the online hosted solution? How does all this fit together?
So basically, Yonder's a cloud-based solution that can be accessed by a web browser of choice or the offline app that is available for tablets and smartphones. The solution can, of course, also be integrated with the customer's Active Directory services. So when a user accesses Yonder, it automatically pulls all the relevant information from the Active Directory services and only presents the information to employees that is truly relevant to their particular role and mission, all the way down to the visible content within a given document, that is. And although Yonder is an all-in-one documentation management solution, it's by no means a closed system, but geared towards interacting with other solutions via REST API. Or in other words, Yonder's open interface architecture ensures that it can establish even two-way communications with other systems as well.
Yeah, it's nice to be able to have that capability to be able to interact. That makes really good sense from a technology and an infrastructure standpoint. Very good. So listen, the next question I have is that we all know that EFBs have to be approved and documents have to be approved by regulatory agencies. And so we wanted to know how this process is helping or optimizing, the regulatory approval process.
Right. So simplifying compliance-related information management for our customers is one of Yonder's key objectives. To that end, Yonder provides the possibility to link content directly to the underlying dependency and trigger an automatic change request once that dependency changes. To state but one example, content can be directly linked to the underlying regulations via third-party providers, such as ASQS, for example. And whenever the underlying regulation changes, for example, originating from EASA, IOSA, or even regional ones for that matter, it triggers the aforementioned behavior. The same principle applies to interlinking dependencies within the organization's documentation landscape, by the way, thereby ensuring that content is always well aligned and avoids information discrepancies across the documentation landscape.
Yeah, excellent. I think all that put together will make the regulatory agencies and things, confident that what is being accomplished by the operator, is of high quality and well managed and well controlled, and it helps with that whole effective rollout process. Perfect. Okay, listen, I have one final question I want to bring up. Is it, many times when people are implementing systems, and new solutions, it always ends up being challenging and it takes a long time. And I know that you have actually put in, a process which really helps to simplify and expedite, implementation process. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So in general, Yonder expedites implementation process in various ways. Projects usually begin by having several workshops with the customer in order to jointly come up with suitable content concepts and to design the workflows that truly reflect the customer's internal revision and approval processes. Doing so also lays the groundwork for an efficient project right from the get-go and provides a clear way forward while promoting a common understanding of the objectives for all involved. Yonder also makes it easy to import the customer's legacy documentation via document preprocessors, meaning that legacy content is automatically translated to modularized XML content, which is basically the currency that our solution runs on, if you will. Most importantly, however, we don't see ourselves as a software vendor, but as a solution provider and partner in crime, so to speak. By that logic, it's no surprise that we're also involved during the implementation project and that we help our customers to overcome any unforeseen challenges that may come up during the implementation project.
Yeah, excellent. It's really very good because I've talked to so many people over the years that have done system and solution implementations, and they're many times challenged, by the time and the success and the implementation. And I understand that recently that you've actually even been approved by by a large or software tablet organization, which we can't talk about yet. But what you're doing is actually quite successful and is helping quite a bit. So much so that large industries are recognizing it, and operators that I've talked to have considered it to be highly successful. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing the success that you're going toward. So let's kind of wrap this up. And for those of you that are getting ready to watch the webinar today, and what I really wanted you just to do for me, if you could, is I always like asking people this, is that, can you really just tell me what Yonder is trying to accomplish? What is the main thing that you're trying to be successful on at this point in time?
So everything that Yonder does is done with one of two core questions in mind. Firstly, how can we facilitate documentation management and improve the efficiency of the related processes for the sake of our customers? The answer to that ranges from automating repetitive tasks, for example, managing recurrent revisions originating from manufacturer OEM manuals, such as the ones from Airbus and Boeing, to leveraging third-party data sources instead of duplicating it, and in the power of links, which is highly underestimated as far as I'm concerned, given that links between dependencies can in fact trigger any number of behaviors that promote a more efficient approach to consistent documentation management. And a second question that we usually ask ourselves is, how can we simplify the consumption of content for the end users and ensure that the information presented to them is truly geared towards their actual role and mission? Now, we accomplish that by presenting end users with dynamic content and personalized revision notifications, both powerful functionalities that ensure that end users can focus on what actually matters to them without facing unnecessary distractions.
Okay, well, perfect, Roger. Listen, for those of you watching today, I like doing a summary at the beginning of an event because I want people to know the scope of what it is that we're going to talk about. Now, the event now will get into more details in each of these areas, which will help you to really understand how you can be successful in implementing an EFB, within your own environment. And so you definitely are going to want to see more details because the knowledge that you're going to learn, over the period of this upcoming webinar is really very, very significant. And so, Roger, I guess we're going to jump right in now, and you're going to talk about, all the details, and Roger's going to bring in some additional people to be able to support him and, talk about some of the different aspects of it. So I guess we should head right into the webinar.
Let's do that. Looking forward to it.
Very good. All right, thanks.
Thank you.
Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this webinar. Today, it is my pleasure indeed to share some of the main benefits that result from our approach to critical information management in aviation. You will also get to meet some of my colleagues throughout this session, as you can see. Together, we'll try our best to provide you with a comprehensive overview on some of Yonder's core functionalities, and, more importantly, how to use these capabilities to solve your challenges along the way. With all of that being said, allow me to begin by providing you with a high-level product overview before getting into detailed feature discussions and such. For starters, Yonder is offered as a cloud-based software-as-a-service solution, meaning that the solution does not have to be maintained by your own IT, and that all the necessary updates are included in the subscription fee. That in itself is a benefit worth mentioning, considering that it provides your organization with predictable costs while avoiding additional complexity for your IT department. As a leading solution provider in the documentation management domain, we're equally proud and thankful to work with well-recognized brands such as Cargolux, the TUI Group, and several members of the Lufthansa Group, to name but a few. And although Yonder is a well-established product, it is still a young product. As such, it is built on the latest technology stack and completely free from legacy tech. Which is why we like to say that we are built for the future with the present in mind. As an all-in-one solution, it features all the necessary components to account for seamless documentation management. However, one of Yonder's key benefits is that it is not a closed system at all. Quite the opposite, in fact, considering that Yonder is built based on open architecture principles, resulting in the ability to connect to third-party systems as well. As we will see a bit later on, that can be a tremendous benefit for our customers, especially as it pertains to automation and leveraging information from other sources. But first, allow me to provide you with a quick overview on Yonder's architecture, or main components, if you will. For starters, the solution consists of a so-called back and front end. The back end consists of an admin interface, the native Yonder editor, which is an XML-based editor used to create and update dynamic content, and a platform to enhance and distribute existing content. Synonymous to the front end is the Yonder Reader, which is what the majority of users get to use on a daily basis. Namely, to consume and work with the information that originates from the back end. Users working with the documentation can access their role-based information either by using the web client version that is accessible via web browser of choice, or the offline app that is available for tablets and smartphones. And on top of it all sits Yonder's fully integrated workflow engine. And by saying fully integrated, I mean that workflows seamlessly run between Yonder's back and front end, as opposed to the often observed gap that airlines had to deal with in their disconnected legacy systems from the past. By using our system, one benefits from an integrated approach that truly allows your organization to reflect its internal revision and approval procedures without compromise. Even if external approvers, such as your civil aviation authorities, are in the mix, for example. As previously mentioned, Yonder does indeed feature a native editor solution, and as such allows to directly import XML content from other authoring systems as well. Or, in other words, if you happen to have existing XML documentation from your legacy systems, you may import that without having to worry about starting from scratch. The same holds true for exporting documentation from our system, by the way, as you may easily export content to XML and use it in other systems. It's certainly worth mentioning that documentation can also be exported to PDF, be it for compliance or other purposes. And thanks to YonderMind's capability to export PDFs based on any number of style sheets, an organization can export one and the same document to different PDF layouts, depending on its use case. As briefly mentioned in the beginning, YonderMind can also connect to third-party solutions to further enhance YonderMind's capabilities. A prominent example includes the ability to connect content within your documentation directly to the underlying regulations, namely via dedicated providers of quality and compliance management solutions, such as IQSMS, for example. But more on that a bit later on. In a nutshell, YonderMind features everything an airline may depend on to account for seamless documentation management. Hence, from creating and publishing your content, all the way to revising it based on your internal revision and approval procedures, YonderMind allows you to deliver reliable, role-based information to your frontline employees, both via web client and the offline app that is available for tablets and smartphones. In fact, we've built our product with the objective of leveraging the full potential of digital content, always aiming to simplify information management and to maximize efficiency for the sake of our customers. Example: YonderMind is capable of automating the reconciliation management between the manufacturer's OEM manuals, such as the ones originating from Airbus and Boeing, and your customized documentation. For the sake of illustration, let's imagine that Airbus delivers the latest revision of an A320 FCOM. Once imported into YonderMind, the system automatically compares it to your Operation Manual Part B, followed by automatically implementing the manufacturer's changes whenever the counterpart within the operator's manual shows no customizations. If customizations are detected, however, they can be manually discussed and implemented, always based on workflows that reflect the airline's internal revision and approval procedures, of course. The same setup is possible for other manuals, such as FCTMs, MELs, QRHs, and so on. In fact, YonderMind supports this concept for all manuals delivered in a structured format, including but not limited to the ones coming from Airbus and Boeing. We can even provide this setup for sources such as Lufthansa Systems Route Manual and automatically synchronize it to your customized OMC, to state but one additional example. But we'll come back to this topic a bit later on when our CEO, Tom Vogel, will aim to provide you with additional insights on this matter. Meanwhile, end users working with the documentation benefit from dynamic content instead of having to deal with static documents, which really is the basis for presenting them with information tailored to their respective role and mission. In fact, most if not all benefits related to using our system are related to how information is stored. YonderMind follows a modular approach to documentation management, meaning that document content is split up into discrete units of reusable information, or information modules as we like to call them, that can be further refined with additional properties and functionality. This brings about many benefits, including the ability to tag these information modules and dynamically limit the visible content of a document to what's truly relevant to an end user's particular role. Let me switch to the web client version of the YonderMind Reader to give you a better feel for how the end user actually works with the documentation, and to demonstrate why we believe that dynamic content is the gold standard to delivering the right information at the right time to your employees. So, this is the dashboard of the YonderMind Reader, basically the landing page for users that work with the documentation. Now, while we are currently on the web client version, do keep in mind that the same information would also be accessible via the offline app that is available for tablets and smartphones. The layout of the YonderMind Reader is entirely based on Google Material Design and provides a user-friendly way to work with the information by eliminating any unnecessary distractions. The dashboard is a good example for that. The document column on the left shows all of the documents that are accessible to a particular user with a particular role. Everything in YonderMind is role governed, and you get to decide what part of the documentation you want to make accessible for which roles. The next column shows all of the favorites set by the end user, which can be set on the document and chapter level, but also on an individual information module. So, these two columns, documents and favorites, are used to work with existing information. My tasks and flashcards, on the other hand, are used by the end users to work with changes. The My Task list is a personalized revision inbox that only presents changes that are relevant to an end user's particular role within the organization. Individual items can be set to read or read and acknowledge. And once the My Task list is empty, a pilot basically knows that he or she is compliant to go flying. The flashcards work like the little study cards that you may have used at school back in the day, with the questions on one side and the answer on the other. The task list is used to work through the changes, and the flashcards are used to study the changes. The My Workflow column is only shown to users that are involved in a workflow, either because they're subject matter experts or because they are approvers of changes. We see what documents are currently in revision. We see notifications that I either have to work through or that I'm just notified about. And then I see my change requests that I have issued myself. YonderMind can be used for the entire documentation landscape in an airline, ranging from manufacturer manuals like FCOMs, FCTMs, MEL, QRHs, to the classic operation manuals or even guides. The way YonderMind is set up allows to reuse content without creating duplicates and to reference content between different manuals. Let's go ahead by inspecting one of the documents that we've set up for demo purposes, such as the OMA, for example. After clicking on the outline icon, we may choose the particular chapter we're interested in, such as the subchapter 912, which I've happened to mark as a favorite, as you can see. At this point, we can also use these little arrows, or the ones located on our physical keyboards for that matter, to move through the content. And as you may notice, these pages, so to speak, aren't the same length. This is because we don't actually have pages in YonderMind anymore, but what we like to call content flows. So, instead of having to deal with rigid page dimensions and limitations still related to the physical paper from the past, YonderMind allows you to group content on the same page according to what makes sense, or by what belongs together. And in this case, it's a whole chapter, but it can also be certain subchapters, checklists, or whatever else makes sense. And as previously mentioned, you do still have the option to export a document to PDF based on any number of layouts that you might depend on, for example, for compliance purposes. With that being said, here at Yonder, we truly believe that classic documents are a concept from the past altogether, and really just another roadblock to realizing the full potential of what digitization is truly capable of. And yes, for the lack of a better term, there are still documents in YonderMind as well. In reality, however, and as previously alluded to, a document in YonderMind is merely a container that holds a collection of information modules that is by no means bound to the typical limitations of classic documents. Allow me to draw your attention to these little arrows here on the right-hand side. Each one of these indicates such an information module, meaning a discrete unit of content that can be identified and managed as a unique information block. YonderMind's modular approach to documentation management is in fact the key principle to managing your documentation more efficiently and reliably than in the past. Or, in other words, The ability to enrich these information modules with additional information and functionalities is what truly unlocks the full potential of our solution, thus allowing, for example, to add one or several tags to these individual modules, such as the ones visible here, and to dynamically filter content by these tags. Example: as soon as I choose AOC Germany here, you will notice that the information about AOC Switzerland disappears, like so. Hence, applied filters limit the visible content of a document to what's relevant to a given role and mission. You may also choose to pull user-specific profiles directly from your organization's Active Directory and to limit the visible content for a given user by default as well. Either way, it's easy to see how that could benefit both the end users in dealing with the information and the organization as a whole in its efforts to streamline its documentation landscape. And as I'm switching over to our demo operation manual part B, rest assured that even tables, such as the one visible here, can be dynamically filtered in that way. So, if I'm a pilot flying the Boeing 737-800, and I happen to be interested in a specific registration, sea fume, for example, I can limit the information to the relevant table rows as well. Like so. Even YonderMind Search applies this principle, allowing users to limit their search results to what actually matters to them. So, if I'm a pilot that needs information on noise abatement for Airport Frankfurt, I can simply search for noise and limit my results either by the specific document or by applying additional filters, as demonstrated on the screen right now. To access a corresponding search result, we can simply click on it, of course. So again, information modules can be refined with additional information and functionalities. To that end, a click on the corresponding arrow on the right-hand side is going to pull up all of the details related to the respective module, such as general information that includes its specific owner and the module's defined validity period, among other information. Eventually, we'll be going through all of the available tabs here. But for now, let's take a look at another aspect that allows users to focus on the right information at the right time, namely personalized revision updates. Via the Change Request tab, qualified users get to issue change requests for a given module, which we'll discuss in more detail when talking about YonderMind's workflow capabilities. Anyhow, once a change request has reached a certain status, for example, ready for publish, the respective workflow role can add a change description to this change. And these detailed change descriptions can then be used to inform document users explicitly on those changes that they truly must know about. Or, to put it differently, instead of pilots having to go through generic highlights of revisions to figure out what changes actually do have an impact on their role, they will benefit from personalized revision notifications instead. Do mind that these notifications can also be set to read and acknowledge, which means that the receiver of such a notification, here on the My Task list, would have to actively acknowledge having read about the change. Let's click on the item right here to get an idea on how that could look like. So, here we see the revised information, which we can once again compare to the previous version by clicking on the compare icon right here. Or we can click here on the X should we like to see the revised information in the context of the document, whereas the particular information is visible with a gray background in this view to facilitate locating it in context. All the way on the bottom is the window that allows me to acknowledge this change, thereby confirming that I have indeed read and understood the revised content. By doing so, and as we get back to the dashboard, you can see that the item did in fact disappear from the My Task list. Or, in other words, whenever this list is empty, I as a pilot can be confident that I'm ready to go flying. So far, We've gained perspective on YonderMind's capabilities to limit the visible content for a given user to what's relevant to their particular role, mission, or topic, and how they can benefit from personalized revision updates. But what about studying changes in procedures, for example? How can I, as a pilot, personalize my approach to learning while making sure that I'm always studying with the most current information? Our answer? Dynamically updated flashcards. These can be directly created by the end user. To do so, we navigate to the respective information module within a document, access the flashcard tab, and directly generate such a study card based on the information module's content. Simply click on the plus sign, formulate a question that corresponds to the module-specific content, and assign it either to an existing or newly defined set. These sets can then be accessed directly from the dashboard, like so. Since these cards directly link to the information module's content, they're always up to date, as they always stay in sync with revised content. If users would like to see the answer in context, they can access the specific document section by clicking on the icon depicted on the top right, like so. Now, after discussing our end-user-centric approach to information delivery, it certainly makes sense to talk about reliable content management as well. Or, in other words, let's talk about revisions. As mentioned during the introduction, YonderMind features a fully integrated workflow engine that seamlessly connects YonderMind's back and front end. These document-specific workflows are highly customizable indeed and can be configured to guide approvals throughout the entire life cycle of a given document. Visible on your screen right now is but a generic workflow example that shall illustrate the appraised flexibility. In this example, a subject matter expert issues a change request, which then automatically triggers a notification to a central function, which then would be tasked with classifying the change based on its impact. And, depending on the classification, the workflow would then branch out accordingly, thereby involving the necessary stakeholders just in time, so to speak, including external ones, if so required. Let's access the document to see how that works in practice. We start by accessing the respective module that we like to issue a change request for, like so. The Change Request tab allows subject matter experts to actually communicate their change requests right here in the content, without having to deal with extensive editor solutions. Namely, by clicking on the plus sign depicted right here. They may edit the existing information module, its title, propose adding a new information module, or to delete the existing one altogether. So, after clicking on Edit Content here, an editor window pops up right away. I can now capture my change request, provide a summary, and submit it. By doing so, the change request automatically enters the document-specific workflow. And again, these workflows are fully customizable indeed, thereby ensuring that your existing internal revision and approval processes are reflected without having to compromise whatsoever. And as you can see, the change request is now visible here under the Change Requests tab. While the same holds true for the dashboard, where you can always track and access your personal change requests via the My CR tab as well, other stakeholders are informed via the Notifications tab. That is, whenever a specific workflow step requires someone to take action, or when it enables certain stakeholders to join in on discussions related to a pending change. These notifications can also be sent via email, of course. If I access the particular change request I've just issued before, like so, you can see that its current status is set to in Analyze, right here. Now, keep in mind that the related workflow featured in this demo is merely an example and could look completely different for your setup. With that being said, the responsible person for the first step in this demo workflow would now have the opportunity to classify this change, and depending on the classification, the workflow would branch out differently. In this case, however, let's go ahead and classify it as a change request with minor impact. And once submitted, it will follow all of the necessary approval steps that correspond to this classification and particular piece of documentation, of course. For illustrational purposes, I actually prepared a similar change request that went through nearly all the necessary stages to become approved. And here it is. Just like what would have been the case for our previous example, you can now see the current version and the one containing the change proposal. It also depicts the corresponding workflow history right here and its status, stating that it's currently awaiting internal approval. And while additional files uploaded during this workflow's lifecycle are accessible via the Attachments tab, the relevant stakeholders are invited to discuss the potential change, depending on their role and workflow stage, of course, right here in the Discussion tab. Having all of that taking place right here not only decreases the need for physical revision meetings, but also yields the benefit of having a seamless revision and audit trail available at all times. And as previously alluded to, instead of generic updates for users, you may configure personalized notifications for each and every change that was applied. I now would like to move on to the next topic on our agenda and talk about YonderMind's automated approach to revising information coming from rather specific sources, such as the OEM manuals originating from Airbus and Boeing, for example. To that end, it is my pleasure to hereby welcome our CEO, Tom Vogel, to the table, who will gladly share his expertise in this domain.
Thank you, Roger, for the intro, and welcome from my side, dear audience. Thanks for joining us today in this webinar. I'm going to talk about OEM manuals right now. So Airbus, Boeing manuals, I'm sure you're all aware, these are the most complex manuals you'll typically find in an airline. There's very complex structures, they're very long. Often they have tail fin activities. If you have different planes of the same type with different generations, they might have certain features installed or not. And these documents, they typically pose the greatest challenges in terms of documentation management. The good thing is that both Airbus and Boeing, they provide those manuals in a structured format with unique IDs in the modules. So that means we can basically detect which part of these manuals have changed, and we can automatically import them, be that initially or differentially. The next thing in line is the FCOM versus OMB. We realize from our customers and our experience that there is a difference between Airbus and their FCOM structure and the Boeing and their Volume 1 and Volume 2 philosophy. And we have done both for customers previously. And as mentioned, the key capabilities from YonderMind are the differential import based on those unique module IDs from Airbus or Boeing. And with this, we can automatically throw change requests where then the customer can decide, do you want to take over the change as provided by Airbus or Boeing, or do you want to customize it even? You can even customize differentially imported manuals, but be aware of the complexity that you add by doing customizations and the limited benefit as more and more the industry is moving into a OEM procedure world. So the value of customizing OEM manuals is decreasing, I would say, from my experience. What will stay, and what is a very important thing, is that you need to bring your FCOM or Volume 1 and 2 into a predefined structure, such as the EASA OMB structure. And with this, you can use our reused content functionality. My colleague Roger will talk about this later on during this webinar. But you can still use the standard manuals differentially imported from Airbus or Boeing and then transfer them in a structure that's being accepted by your NAA. I'm going to talk more about NAAs in just a little moment. Right, so Airbus and Boeing manuals, most complex manuals we have in an airline, structured formats, lengthy content, and of course we can do just exactly this with other lengthy, complex documents. And we've done this, for example, with the Lido route manual and OMC general part. That's a document that's being updated every second week. That spans around 4,000 pages. And we can use the same principles as for Airbus and Boeing, where we can import the manual differentially and see what has changed. In contrast to Airbus and Boeing, with the Lido route manual and OMC general part, you can even use the change log from Lido with the differential import and transfer this automatically into the My Tasks that you can just then use to inform your crews what has changed in the latest version of this OMC general part. And of course, you can filter or match the groups of those My Task notifications. So for example, if you have any change for ETOPS routes or something like this, you might not want to send this to your pilots that only fly short-haul continental, but only to the long-haul pilots. And from this process, you can actually benefit from efficiency increases because you don't have to do this manually, and you don't need to leave it to the crew to find out what has changed and not. So now we have talked about handling complex structured documents, and the last few words I would like to share with you is about the revision approvals by external authorities, so typically NAAs. And one of the reasons why we built Yonder as a cloud application is so that you are able to include external partners such as an NAA in the approval workflow. I remember back in the days when I was still the head of e-operations at Swiss that I would actually have to give an access to our local documentation solution to the person at the NAA so that he could actually read and check the documents that we were publishing. And with Yonder, you can do this just by adding an inspector on the cloud, and he can just access the documents from wherever he is. He doesn't need a custom installation of your software. He doesn't need a company device. He can do this from anywhere in the world. So now the NAA has access to your documents through Yonder. Of course, some authorities, they still insist on paper or PDF approvals. Some others, they use Yonder. And for us, it's really both is fine. We are Swiss. We are used to work with different approaches. We are used to work with mighty neighbors. We can do with both. But the idea of the software is that you can actually do this on a fully digital path if you want and if it's allowed by your authority. One thing that we have noticed in the discussions with our customers, NAAs, is that some authorities insist on a difference between an approval and a no objection, as they call it. So a lot of authorities, they don't want to give an approval or click a button that says approval. Of course, you can just name the button whatever you like in the workflow, and you can just put a no objection label on the button, and then NAAs will typically be easier with clicking that button. And of course, clicking it doesn't mean it's an approval in a PRA sense. So you will still need to have some formal approval from your authority, but you can do the whole approval process and the prior approval process on a digital way, and thus increase the time between submitting a revision and receiving an answer. The operators or the airline is typically our customer, and at the same time we still need to make the authority happy, because if the customer cannot get an approval from the authority, then it's not really worth having a software. So it's really our strong belief that we should involve the NAAs as early as possible in a project when we set up Yonder, so that we can find out, do people insist on paper or PDF? Do they insist on a wording like the no objection? Or are they completely fine with the process that we use? It depends widely between countries. More importantly, it depends widely between individual people in the same country. So we do have multiple customers in the same country where the authority or the responsible inspector does not necessarily have the same opinion than another inspector in the same country. That's normal. We can't change this. But again, to make the customers happy, we need to make sure that we search the contact with the corresponding inspector so that we can avoid difficulties down the road. That was it from my side, dear audience. Thanks for joining me today, and I will hand back to Roger.
Thank you, Tom. It's worth pointing out that we have just recently held an entire webinar on what Thomas kindly alluded to just now, where our CPO and former Airbus A330-340 pilot Christoph Makler demonstrates in great detail how exactly YonderMind facilitates the synchronization between OEM manuals and the operator's customized documentation. If you'd like to watch the on-demand version of that webinar at some point, you may do so at any time, namely by visiting the webinar and events page on our website. Speaking of Christoph, we are now moving on to the next topic, which will focus on how your airline can manage its content dependencies in YonderMind. Christoph, thanks for joining me here. The floor is all yours.
My pleasure, Roger, and thank you for your time today, dear audience. So, I have the pleasure of introducing you to YonderMind's powerful link engine today. This link engine allows you to monitor any dependencies that your content may face, be it to underlying standards and regulations from an external source, internal guidelines and policies, or whatever else might be the case. Links to related internal and/or external resources can be set via the Links tab. Let's start by discussing the possibility to monitor your compliance-relevant content first. YonderMind is capable of enabling two-way communications with external databases indeed. Thus, information modules can be directly linked to regulatory databases, to state but one example. So, if a given information module contains a legal reference to an FAA, IOSA, EASA, or any other regulation or standard for that matter, it can be directly linked to its official counterpart. A user with the right permission can therefore simply click on the plus sign depicted here on the bottom right, followed by accessing the link time drop-down and choosing legal. After pasting the corresponding target link to the specific regulation and adding appropriate link description, the information module is officially linked to that regulation after hitting the Create button. And once the official regulation changes, a module-specific change request is triggered automatically, thereby enabling the respective stakeholders to make an informed decision on how to implement the change on the information module level. Such change requests will then be funneled through specific compliance-related approval workflows that reflect your internal processes accordingly, of course. It's important to note that we do not provide these regulations you will be linking to ourselves. Or in other words, you do need to have a provider that offers the relevant services. We can certainly recommend ASQS, an Austrian provider and pioneer of web-based safety, quality and risk management solutions, as we already offer a well-established interface to their solution. In fact, our collaboration with ASQS allows for a two-way communication between YonderMind and their quality and safety management solution, or IQSMS in short. So, for starters, and as already mentioned, information modules can be directly linked to the underlying regulations via IQSMS. And once the underlying regulation is being updated by ASQS, any number of actions can be triggered automatically for the respective module in YonderMind, including but not limited to the triggering an automatic change request for the corresponding information. However, YonderMind can also apply updates to IQSMS, for example, by means of grabbing the URL of linked module and passing it to a specific audit item. Having this information available in IQSMS certainly benefit quality and compliance monitoring departments, considering the time that can be saved during audits. Hence, instead of auditors having to wait for process owners to locate the content related to a given audit question, the auditee can simply access the respective question in IQSMS and instantly demonstrate where the corresponding procedure is in fact documented. In the foreseeable future, open findings captured in IQSMS will even be capable of automatically triggering a change request for the corresponding content in YonderMind, and once the content has been updated accordingly, YonderMind will automatically trigger a corrective action for the respective item on the IQSMS side. With all of that being said, we can link to any other provider that offers similar services as well, of course. One can also set up such dependencies between content from different documents in YonderMind. For example, to make sure that your documentation always reflects the latest changes in your internal standards and guidelines. The logic behind is no different from what I have previously demonstrated. Once a link to a dependency exists and is being changed, the system again will trigger an automatic workflow for the content that is linked to the respective dependency. Setting up such a link between specific content and its underlying dependency is a straightforward process. Simply navigate to the dependency and access the information module. Click on the 3 dots on the top right and choose Add to Clipboard. Then access the Link tab for the information you would like to link to. Hit the plus sign. Choose the link type Legal, followed by pasting in the previously selected link target and giving it a link description, like so. At this point, we have successfully linked this information module to the underlying dependency once again, and will receive automatic change requests for this content whenever the dependency is being changed. So, no matter if you'd like to connect your content to external compliance databases or link content between your documents for whatever reason, YonderMind can help you keep track, thereby providing the means to simplify your quality and compliance-related information management sustainably. And it's certainly worth pointing out that qualified users, for example belonging to your compliance team, can also generate reports on all of these dependencies, be it on which dependency is linked to which content, or pulling reports from a document's perspective, showing to which sources it is linked to overall. YonderMind's link engine can also be leveraged to manage multilingual manuals. In this rather basic demo example, one of the same manual exists in 3 different languages. And if I access an information module, I can directly switch to the corresponding content in the remaining languages. That alone is certainly nice to have from an end user's perspective. However, the true benefit lies in simplifying revisions of an organization's multi-language documentation. To make it short, YonderMind allows to specify a master language per document that can then be linked to its counterpart in another language, module by module. Revisions can then be limited to the master language. And once a revised item reaches the ready for publish status, for example, it would then automatically trigger a translation workflow for the other language or languages for that matter.
Thank you for these valuable insights into YonderMind's powerful link engine, Christoph.
My pleasure indeed, and thanks for your attention, ladies and gentlemen.
More than anything, I hope that Christoph's demonstration did in fact complement your understanding of how truly digital information management can take some weight off your shoulders, allowing us all to focus more on subject matter expertise instead of manual work that adds little to no value. The ability to reuse content is yet another functionality supporting these objectives. By accessing a given information module's context tab, we can see where a particular module is anchored and where it has been reused, if at all the case. So, YonderMind's modular approach is also the basis for being able to freely reuse content between documents and automatically update duplicates whenever the original information is being changed. Which is a great feature to have, considering how easy it becomes to create theme guides by reusing information from different sources, without having to maintain them separately. Typical examples coming to mind are winter ops guides and crew manuals, which usually have a big overlap with information that is already available from other sources. Whatever the specific use case may be, It's easy to see that these automatic updates on reused content would mitigate the risk of having outdated duplicates and conflicting information scattered across your documentation landscape. And of course, the reused information can be accessed directly from within the Context tab as well, like so. Yonder provides a clear-cut system to efficient documentation management. It frees users both from unnecessary distractions as well as manual labor, and is geared towards delivering reliable, role-based information to your frontline employees. And that's great. But here at Yonder, we're truly convinced that none of this matters should we fail to support our customers in solving their challenges along the way. It is my pleasure to now welcome our Chief Customer Officer, who will gladly elaborate on this topic. Hi, Suzanne, and thanks for joining.
Thank you, dear Roger, for introducing me. And a very warm welcome to this webinar also from my side. Now, already knowing a bit about Yonder, our software as a service offer, you might think that this is a very powerful solution, which is true. But the question now is, what makes a powerful product great? Is it really the product on its own? No. Of course, the product quality and reliability are important. They are actually the basis. But it is the experience, the customer experience, which is delivered to our customers that completes the offer and that makes it great. Therefore, we are offering a tailor-made onboarding service to accommodate for different needs. This ranges from using standard workflow templates and video tutorials to tailor-made setup and configuration combined with on-site training. Okay, how does that go now? So at Yonder, after a customer has signed a contract with us, our sales department hands over the customer to our customer team in a personal handover meeting. In our customer team, we have very experienced and competent account managers covering different industries. The range goes from mechanical engineering to electrical engineering and investment banking, up to a former fighter jet pilot. Thus, we can finally choose the best account manager for each of our customers, as we want to make sure that we are able to understand the different customer needs. The account manager, who is experienced in project management as well, starts an onboarding project with the new customer. This is an intense process where we prepare everything we need to set up Yonder for the new customer. We, for example, define the customized roles and filters in Yonder, as well as the tailor-made workflows, which were explained by Roger earlier. We also define the necessary IT configuration, like, for example, the user authentication. Another part of the onboarding project is the conversion of the documents into Yonder. That means, together with our customer, we convert the documents and we make sure that they are available in Yonder for the end user. We facilitate trainings for the end user of Yonder who only read in Yonder, but also for the editors who are able to edit content in the documents or even create new documents. So, from the very beginning, our target is to establish a sound and reliable relationship with our customer. During regular meetings, we give advice to the usage of Yonder, and we explain new features. We answer all different kinds of questions, and we also discuss about customer needs and ideas how to improve Yonder. And this is a really important part for both our customers and ourselves. We are a young company and we are continuously developing Yonder and the services we are offering. For example, we are upgrading existing functions. And of course, we also add new features. To enable our product team that Yonder and those new features are covering our customer needs, we include our customers in our product process. That means that in an early stage, during the so-called evaluation phase, we invite customers to gather their feedback about the new features. We strongly believe that a successful product is the one which serves our customers and which makes their life easier. Thus, we are very interested in this interaction phase, where we discuss the features, and it helps us a lot to understand our customer needs. In addition, we facilitate a Yonder user conference, where we invite our customers to discuss, again, new product features with us. It's a nice and interesting event where presentations and discussions, but also networking is an integral part. So that was a bit like an express train through our customer process, which of course is quite individual, each time depending on the needs. But for now, I hand over back to Roger. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanne. And with that, I'd like to conclude today's demonstration of the Yonder Mind Reader. But before moving on to the Q&A section, allow me to provide you guys with a quick summary of the main benefits that result from using our solution. Yonder Mind follows a modular approach to documentation management, an approach that we believe to be ideal when aiming for managing documentation both efficiently and reliably at all times. It not only facilitates the actual management of the documentation, including all of its dependencies, but it also decreases the risk of overwhelming the end user with non-relevant information. Or, in other words, it provides users with the right information at the right time, namely by limiting the visible document content dynamically and by delivering role-based revision updates to the end user. One also benefits from features that prioritize reliable documentation management. For example, by avoiding duplication, as you may directly reference content between documents. And whenever the source module is being changed, it will automatically be updated wherever it has been reused, thereby avoiding outdated duplicates and conflicting information across your documentation landscape. And by linking modules directly to regulatory databases maintained by providers such as ASQS, compliance is ensured all the way down to the module level, namely by triggering automatic change requests whenever these content-related regulations change. Thus, dependencies are always well monitored and manual tracking of such items can be avoided at last. And since all revision-related decisions and discussions are tracked in an uncompromisable audit trail, there's a seamless audit and revision trail available at all times. Yonder Mind's fully integrated workflow capabilities also enable your organization to manage revisions more efficiently. Since all revision-related interactions take place in Yonder Mind, there's no need to have all experts and decision makers in one room anymore. To that end, it's also worth repeating that subject matter experts can bring in their expertise without ever having to deal with extensive editor solutions. Instead, SMEs can truly focus on their expertise and issue their module-specific change requests right in the Yonder Mind Reader, consequently allowing the relevant stakeholders to further discuss and approve it via document-specific workflows that reflect your internal processes accordingly. Last but not least, Yonder Mind's automation capabilities are yet another substantial feature that allow organizations to become more efficient in managing their documentation. Thanks to several OEM manual connectors being available, customers may benefit from automatic updates between manufacturer manuals, such as the ones originating from Airbus and Boeing, for example, and their customized documentation. And speaking of connectors, we are continually expanding the scope of our connectors to further support our customers with efficient solutions to minimize repetitive work while ensuring reliable information at all times. One prominent example includes the recently developed Lido OMC connector, which allows to automatically update your customized OMC with the latest information coming from Lufthansa Systems' Lido route manual. And with that being said, we are reaching the end of this webinar. If you have any questions at all, or if you'd like us to provide you with a tailor-made demo at some point, feel free to reach out to us at any time, either via the contact details visible on the screen right now, or via the contact details available on our website. Thank you for your attention, dear audience, and enjoy the rest of your day.